Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Transportation Security Administration employees are seeing their first paychecks in more than a month. TSA agents are being paid this week despite lawmakers failing to come to an agreement on a Department of Homeland Security spending bill. That means thousands more DHS staff are continuing to work without pay. For more details, Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday joins me now. Justin, thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Cherry.
Walk us through this dichotomy at TSA. Who's seeing paychecks and who is not?
Well, most TSA employees should have received a retroactive paycheck featuring at least 2 full paychecks that they missed during this ongoing shutdown that has now lasted about 46 days. There is a small population that might have seen a delay in those paychecks due to financial institution processing times or issues with direct deposit. That comes from Department of Homeland Security headquarters. And DHS says it's also working aggressively with the Agriculture Department's National Finance Center to process the half paycheck that TSA employees missed on the front end of the shutdown. And so all that's set to say that TSA employees received a substantial portion of their back pay this week. They didn't receive all of it, but DHS is working on it. And so I think you're already seeing some airports have, TSA employees showing up full time. You're not seeing the same level of call out issues that you saw maybe last week. And so clearly this is having an impact for TSA.
The executive order that the president signed directing DHS to make these payments said that they should use funding that was TSA aligned or TSA adjacent. Where is that actual money coming from?
That's the big question. There are reports from several media outlets citing senior administration officials that Trump would use money from last year's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. I mean, there is billions of dollars in spending in that bill that is a little bit more fungible than the annual appropriations that agencies normally operate off of. And you could potentially see Trump or DHS pulling from those accounts because of that issue, because, a lot of other accounts are a lot more restricted. That One Big Beautiful Bill Act did not apportion any money for things like airport security screening or TSA or anything like that. It was for border security, immigration enforcement. And so it's still an open question as to how they kind of connect those two things. But that is what Trump has directed, and that's the most likely pot of money that they would pull from. So more to come there.
And what about the longer impacts on TSA staffing? I mean, it's great that they finally got their paychecks, but this has been a pretty tough run of several months for them.
Yeah, that's right. More than 500 TSA officers quit during this recent shutdown. 1,100 employees quit during last fall's shutdown. And so there is definitely an attrition issue at TSA now over this past 6 months. There are about 47,000 transportation security officers, the folks that are on those airport screening checkpoints nationwide. But you start to see those types of numbers. And there are concerns, especially with this upcoming World Cup this summer, because now at this point in early April, TSA can't hire someone and train them in time to staff an airport checkpoint for June when the World Cup kicks off. It takes about 3 to 4 months to train a TSA officer. And so you can't backfill those positions. Acting TSA Administrator Ha Win McNeil told lawmakers last week that one thing they're trying to do is boost the numbers in their national deployment force, which can surge to different airports across the country. You saw them use that to a degree during this shutdown when there were certain airports like in Texas that saw big problems with TSA staffing. But, not everyone's going to want to join that national deployment force and kind of be pulled around. And, a lot of people are based in a certain area. So TSA is watching those attrition numbers really, really closely now because they can't afford to lose many more people before this summer's uptick in travel.
And are there employees at TSA and certainly across DHS who are continuing to work without pay through this shutdown?
Well, so TSA now should be considered exempt because they are getting paid following the president's directive. But there are still thousands of DHS employees who are not being paid. We know that, ICE and CBP law enforcement officers and some staff are being paid, but there are administrative staff at both of those agencies who are working without pay. There are about 800 employees at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency who are working without pay during the shutdown. There are also thousands of staff at the Federal Emergency Management Agency who are paid through annual appropriations. They are working without pay during the shutdown. And then you look at the Coast Guard. Service members are being paid in line with the Trump administration decision to pay military service members during the shutdown last fall. But there are a lot of civilians at the Coast Guard who are working without pay. So a lot of DHS staff are still being impacted by this shutdown.
And what are you hearing from those employees as far as how this shutdown has been impacting them?
Yeah, I'm hearing that, it's now the second of the month. And of course, rent is due, mortgages are due. And so there's a lot of concerns there. And folks are having to reach out to their mortgage company and talk about options for how they might deal with that. They're asking for their family members for money to help tide them over. They are continuing to show up to work because they are obviously mission-driven people. But, there's challenges even in commuting and costs in commuting, too. There has been some loosening of telework restrictions where some of these folks have been granted the ability to telework for a number of days during the week because the management is recognizing that this is a burden now to work without pay for 46 days, and any burden that they can potentially address might be worth doing at this point because this is becoming an untenable situation for some employees.
We're grateful for the partial solution here in that TSA agents are getting paid, and that seems to address the most urgent issue of airport congestion. But there's also concern that alleviating that pressure might alleviate the pressure on Congress to actually solve this problem. What are you hearing there?
Yeah, that's something a CBP employee pointed out to me, a CISA employee pointed out to me, and a FEMA employee pointed out to me. They work a little bit more behind the scenes, not as public as TSA airport screening, and that airport screening issue, and if you look at the past several shutdowns, has become a lever to kind of force Congress to take action. In this case, obviously, lawmakers could not come up with a deal as of last Friday, and Trump stepped in to take that action to pay TSA employees. But without that, I think a lot of employees are concerned that the sort of public attention on this issue will be less, and therefore pressure on lawmakers will be less to come to a deal in the near term.
That's Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday. Justin, thanks for keeping us up to date.
Thanks, Terry.
You can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com.